Got to say, after watching that video, I'm half tempted to change the name to White Cat Crypto Club. No, guys, this is Black Cat Crypto Club, and my name is Drake. Welcome back. This is going to be a little bit longer of a video today, and I apologize for that. There's just a lot of information that I think you need to know. But please stick around till the end of the video, because the end of this video is really going to be where I show you the opportunities in Bitcoin. We're going to look at the 4-year cycle of Bitcoin, and it'll kind of show you what you can kind of expect price-wise over the next 2 years. So first, I just want to say Bitcoin is kind of the king of crypto, and that's because of one, it's just a massive decentralized network all over the world. And two is because it's scarcity. There's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin ever mined into existence, and we are already at about 20 million. So there's not a lot of this left to be mined. And it's probably the most scarce asset we've ever seen. So that said, the alternative coins, the altcoins, all pretty well follow Bitcoin's cycle. And there is a point where during this cycle, altcoins will outperform Bitcoin, and they're great for that. However, that 4th year where we hit our top and we just start falling, that year altcoins tend to crash even harder than Bitcoin does. So historically, Bitcoin will fare better than any other crypto long term. And if you want to buy and just hold and, not really put much thought into it, Bitcoin is your baby. Okay. Altcoins are great, but if you're just looking to hold, and I always tell everybody, if you're going to buy Bitcoin, plan on worst case scenario, having that money invested in Bitcoin for at least 4 years. And I say that because, the 4-year cycle is a very real thing, and I'll show you that. But there's not a 4-year point in all of Bitcoin's history where the price of Bitcoin is lower than it was 4 years ago. There's not one instance. It's 100%. If you hold Bitcoin for 4 years, you're gonna be happy. Okay. So that's worst case. I mean, even if you bought at the very worst time, the very top of the cycle, if you hold for 4 years, you're going to be good. So with that, I'm going to get into six problems that the traditional finance system has and how Bitcoin solves that. Okay, so the first issue with the traditional finance system is the centralization issue. And I got into that a little bit in the first video. If you haven't seen that, jump over and watch that video right now. But the centralization of our money allows for a lot of power and a lot of control over us. And Bitcoin, nobody controls it. So it's completely decentralized. Nobody can seize it from you. No, you don't need anyone's permission to send and receive, which doesn't sound like a big thing, but if you've ever traveled and you go to use your debit card, if you're out of state or out of country, the bank won't let you use it. And I get that it comes off as like, oh, we're trying to protect you, and that's great. But privacy-wise, I don't see why I should have to tell the bank my every move when their system is so insecure that, this is even an issue. With Bitcoin, the network is completely secure. Nobody can hack it. It's never been hacked. And I don't have to explain my every single move to anybody. And the other thing is that Bitcoin is limited and has a set supply that nobody can change and nobody can inflate it away for their own agenda. So let's get into inflation and currency debasement. There's basically two forms of inflation. And the first one is really like the needs-based inflation. This is called CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, and it's the measurement that the Fed uses to measure inflation. And the things in CPI are like everyday goods and groceries and things like that. But in 2022, we saw CPI hit 9.1%. And everybody, nobody was happy. You went to the grocery store and you were seeing prices just go through the roof. But basically in 2022, your dollar and your wages, if you're on a wage from your employer, your wage, you basically took a 10% cut and your money lost 10% of its purchasing value. So kind of crazy. Essentially, you took a 10% pay cut in 2022, and that was just because of government spending and inflation. So according to the latest CPI numbers, we're at about 3.9% now. And if you think about that, if you put money away, just put money in the bank, that money at a 3.9 or 4% interest every year, APY or inflation, you will lose almost all of your value in 25 years at a 4% inflation rate. So that's still crazy to me. Now, ideally, the Fed's goal is to get inflation to 2%. That's where they want it, and that's where they want it to stay. But even if the Fed meets its best case scenario, this 2%, if you put money in the bank at a 2% inflation rate, your money will lose essentially almost all of its value in 50 years. And it doesn't like, we don't feel it every day, but over 50 years, you lose your entire worth if you just put it in the bank. And the same goes for your wages. Every year you are taking a 2% cut in wages. If you're not getting a raise, you're taking a 2% cut in pay, just according to inflation. And that's just CPI inflation. We're going to get into the second kind of inflation, which is asset inflation. And this is things like real estate, buying a home, stocks, bonds, art. And since 2008, assets have inflated an average of 15% every year. So this is a lot bigger deal than even the 2%. And the 2% is no small thing. We don't feel it day to day, but the 15%, you've most certainly felt that. If you've looked at home prices lately, you've felt that 15% a year. And the big one in that area is housing, obviously. And housing really should be included in CPI because it is a need. And so it should be included in this needs-based inflation. But the Fed, it was included in CPI at one point until 1983 when the Fed decided, this doesn't need to be in here. This is making us look too bad. And so they they took housing and rent costs and housing costs out of CPI inflation so they could look better and show, inflation's not that bad, guys. It's just 2%. When really, come on, housing is a need. But hey, I'm not here saying our money system's rigged or anything, right? Okay, so the second part of asset inflation is the 60/40 bond stock options that a lot of people own. If you go to your bank, and I actually went into my credit union a few months ago just to kind of see what they had to offer, really. And it's this 60/40 bond stock bond split that most financial advisors are going to, be offering. And those, if you ask any financial advisor, they're going to tell you a 60/40 bond stock bond, split will, on average, if you invest for 4 years or so, will give you a good return of 6 to 8%. So if you take that 6 to 8% that you could be investing into the stock market and bonds, that 6 to 8% is actually losing purchasing power compared to asset inflation. If you want to put money into this 60/40 stock bond option and hopefully earn money to put towards a house, you're making the wrong move, because that 6 to 8% isn't even enough to keep even keel with the prices of housing. Now, the S&P index on the internet, or on the stock market, has typically done about 10 to 15% a year. So you invest in the S&P, and when you want to go buy a house, you're according to that 15% thing, you're basically treading water in the S&P index. Now, there's a guy named Raoul Pal, and I'm going to show you a clip of him talking about this exact issue. And he's a pretty well-respected crypto and traditional finance person. He himself was kind of a trader or involved with Goldman Sachs for quite a long time. And it's just interesting. His perspective on this subject is interesting because he actually really acknowledges the underdogs in the working class. And I really like that point of view. Like I said before, this channel's dedicated to the underdogs and the working class. So check out this clip.
So the average citizen's not going to be okay unless they take action. This is why people are angry, whether you're on the left or whether you're the right. You're angry because the system is failing you. And what's happening is you're a wage slave and you can't buy a house. Or you can't invest as much of the stock market that your parents could do. You just, A, cost of living is high, but B, asset prices keep coming up. And that's because they're debasing the currency. And what debasing the currency is, it sounds like a complicated economics term, but what it basically means is they're robbing you of the power to buy assets. It's been on average 15% a year since 2008. So you're losing the ability to buy assets by 15% a year. So each year you sit on a pile of cash and don't buy a house, that house is roughly going up at 15% a year. That's bananas. You sit on cash for 2 years, or you don't have any savings, it gets more and more expensive. What they're actually doing here is taxing you, but by hiding it. It's like a socialization of all of this costs. But what's so massively unfair is it disproportionately hits people who are wage earners who don't own assets. So you and I, we have assets. And so your assets offset that maybe your wages, your income doesn't rise as much. But for the average person, they clock in, they go to work, they come home. Even if you're a dentist or a doctor or a lawyer, you're still in the same boat because your wages are not rising as fast as asset prices. So your future self gets poorer. People don't understand because it looks like their stock market, their 401k's gone up and all of this. But that's only a small percent. That's like 10% of the population who have assets. And those people are very happy with it. The more assets you own, the more powerful you are, the more assets you probably own, the less likely you are going to call the authorities into question. The average guy working in Cincinnati who suddenly can't make his ends meet and can't buy an apartment, what voice does he have in this? And he's being taxed at 15% a year and has been 15% a year. And he has been since 2008. And he just doesn't understand what's going on. He doesn't know who to blame. So what they blame is one party or the other, and it's not.
Great information, and I just love hearing that perspective. But one last thing on inflation, and one more really important cause of inflation, is the constant wars that we find ourselves in. And it's very unpopular for politicians to raise taxes to fund these wars. And if they did, I can almost guarantee you we would see a lot bigger of an anti-war movement than what we have right now. But instead of raising taxes to pay for these wars, what they do is they put the cost of the wars on the Fed balance sheet, and essentially they print out the cost of the war, and everyone is taxed kind of in this hidden way. And they fund these endless wars without us really even knowing about it. And that's why Bitcoin is kind of considered the currency of peace. It's yet another way to opt out of that system, because inflation, the US dollar inflation, doesn't affect Bitcoin the same way it does the dollar. It actually has the opposite effect. So when inflation goes up and the dollar loses its value, Bitcoin technically increases in value against the dollar because the dollar is becoming weaker and weaker. It's not that Bitcoin's necessarily getting better. It's just the dollar is getting worse. So it's just another way to opt out of that war mentality, that war financial system. So number 2 on our traditional finance flaws is security. And with Bitcoin, we see the most secure network that humans have ever known. You know, Bitcoin has never been hacked in all of its existence. And the reason for that is really its decentralized nature. So to hack Bitcoin, essentially, you have to hack literally every single mining computer around the world all at the same time. So you can kind of see how ridiculous the thought of that even really is. Whereas cyber bank theft is a daily occurrence, and every single centralized system faces security flaws because there's only that one point that a hacker needs to compromise, and they've compromised the entire system. So we've seen, like, Facebook has been hacked. We've seen Equifax be hacked. JP Morgan's been hacked. And it just goes on and on. So you can really see how superior Bitcoin is than traditional finance in that way. The third flaw in traditional finance is fees and remittances. And this is really due to the middleman in traditional finance. For example, Visa and MasterCard, they charge 1.5 to 3.5% every single swipe of the card. And the percentage is even actually more for smaller transactions. And that's why you go into some gas stations and they won't even swipe your card unless you're buying X amount of whatever. So essentially that cost is priced into products that we're buying every day. And it's passed on to all of us when we go to buy things. And the cost of that every single year is $14.31 trillion. And that number doesn't even really, even in my mind, that number doesn't even make sense. But we can literally save that $14.31 trillion every year if we move to Bitcoin, where we can completely cut out the middleman of, these card companies. So getting into number 4 on the flaws is borderless transactions. With Bitcoin, I can send Bitcoin anywhere in the world for minimal cost comparatively to traditional finance, and as fast as possible without the need or permission from any kind of middleman, like I said. So, also when it comes to borderless transactions, try taking $10,000 onto an airplane and, going to a different country, or, not even going to a different country, going to a different state. Put $10,000 in your luggage next time you get on a plane. You don't even have to be doing anything wrong, but you're not breaking any laws, but the TSA will seize that money. And there's a way to get around it. You have to fill out all the paperwork and, tell the TSA exactly, how much money you're taking. But again, it comes back to, privacy. Like, why do I have to tell anybody what I'm doing? I'm not doing anything wrong. It's just, really a privacy issue, and it makes it hard to move money around anywhere. Whereas with Bitcoin, no problems. You can go on an airplane. I can go to Europe and I don't need to take anything. There's nothing anyone can seize on me. And as long as I remember 12 words, once I get to Europe, I've still got every single bit of my money in Bitcoin. So, and it's very reminiscent of, Jewish people in Europe during the 30s and 40s. They would sew valuables, rings, and little things like that into their clothing when they were traveling and trying to move anywhere, because they knew, anything valuable was going to be confiscated from them. And, you can say, well, that doesn't happen, that doesn't happen here. And really, even if you take out the TSA thing, TSA seizures, even if you completely ignore that, I guess that's kind of true until it's not. And then it's too late, guys, so you can kind of see Bitcoin very easy to move around and have borderless transactions. Okay, so the 5th problem with the traditional finance system is efficiency. And most bank transfers take about 3 to 5 days to clear. Whereas Bitcoin, depending on the network traffic, Bitcoin can take, maybe an hour, which seems like a long time, but compared to 3 to 5 days, magnitudes better. But Bitcoin also has scaling developments that have been in the works, and when these developments, like the Lightning Network, really start to be implemented, we'll see Bitcoin being almost instant and cheaper to transact with than it is now. So there are scaling things in the works, but really, we're already beating the traditional finance system in that area. Now, the second part of efficiency is energy usage. And this is a fairly valid argument that I've heard, over the last year or two. And I say it's valid because I am also, concerned with energy usage, anywhere. I think it's something that it's right to look, for the most energy efficient things. But what I've seen, first of all, is, leave it up to the Bitcoiners, but Bitcoin miners, because they can set up their mobile or their mining operations mobily, we've seen Bitcoin miners utilizing wasted energy, like oil burn-offs. So when you're driving down the highway and you see an oil refinery, you see those big stacks that are just burning off like natural gas, basically. And it's just wasted energy. And what Bitcoin miners have been able to do is they've been able to harness that energy and use it to mine Bitcoin. So we're actually using this wasted energy. And I've also seen miners actually going to landfills, and they're catching the methane gas that is emitted off of landfills, and they're powering mining units that way. So it's interesting. I'm not entirely, I know the entire mining industry doesn't utilize things like that. And President Biden has ordered energy reports specifically for Bitcoin miners. And it'll be interesting to see what the true energy impact of mining really is. Either way, it'll be interesting to see what that impact really is. But on top of all of that, I want to show you a graph. I'm going to jump over this to this graph I have. And, what you can see here is the amount of energy used by Bitcoin every year in terawatts. And we're just above, 100 terawatts every year. But if you look over, you've got gold, and don't even get me started on gold. The mining of gold just is absolutely detrimental to ecosystems and the environment. They end up leaving mercury and arsenic in rivers and lakes. And so don't even get me started on that. But if you look at the traditional banking system, and I'm not even sure this includes everything in the banking system. You've got, it looks like card networks, ATMs, bank branches, and that's kind of all included in the top 100 bank data centers. Doesn't include, as far as I can see, that number doesn't include, the Brinks trucks that, go from one bank to the next, transferring actual money. And the oil usage behind that, I'm not sure that's included in this graph. But even if it is, if you look at, Bitcoin, we're just a little over 100. The traditional banking system is over 250 terawatts per year. So as far as energy usage goes, I don't know. You tell me which system is better energy-wise. I don't know, guys. Just interesting graph right there. But another way to look at it also is the internet. You know, the internet uses like 200 to 400 terawatts a year. And you know, we don't see that energy thing with the internet. Nobody's getting off Facebook and not using email because of the energy usage. For one, it actually makes a lot of things in life less energy dependent, such as mail. You know, if we're sending emails instead of, you know, actually driving to the post office, sending an envelope with the letter inside, you know, they have to fly it or drive it or truck it, train it. You know, it's the internet saves a lot of money or a lot of energy in a lot of ways. And so we don't see that argument against the internet. And also the internet has been, you know, love it or hate it, it has been an amazing tool for the freedom and you know, kind of giving the power to everyone. You know, before the internet, access to information was way more limited. You know, it's actually empowered the working class very, very greatly. So just another way to think about it. Also, with the energy consumption thing, we've got a little bit of an issue we should probably talk about, and that's proof of work cryptocurrencies versus proof of stake cryptocurrencies. And what proof of work is, Bitcoin is a proof of work network. And that's, you know, why you see people setting up massive amounts of Bitcoin miners and mining Bitcoin. Doesn't take anything other than you buying equipment and you can mine Bitcoin. And it's, you know, because of that, it does have quite a bit of energy consumption, whereas proof of stake is a whole different system. You have to actually own that cryptocurrency. You have to put that up for stake, and then you can run what's essentially a miner, a validator, from like a laptop computer. So it cuts, proof of stake networks cut the energy consumption down 90%. So, you know, will Bitcoin become proof of stake? It's hard to see. It's, you know, it's really hard to change the Bitcoin network. Basically, every single miner has to agree to run a different code. And so I don't really see that being very likely, but if it ever did become like a detrimental thing, we could definitely move to a more efficient system. What's more likely is we move to different scaling options like the Lightning Network, and it'll make Bitcoin's network a little bit more efficient. Now, I want to apologize because I know a lot of that stuff is a little confusing and, you know, kind of technical sounding and hard to wrap your mind around, but hopefully you were able to gain a little bit of something from that. If not, if you have any questions about any of that stuff, let me know in the comments and I'll try and explain it a little bit different or get you further information if you need. So on to the last problem that Bitcoin, at least here, there's several others, but the last problem that I want to address here is ownership and self-sovereignty. And all I'm really going to say about this is that if you really think that you own the money that you keep in the bank, all you need to do is look back to 2012 when the banks in the Mediterranean, in Cyprus, were facing failure and they basically said to people, that's not your money anymore. That's our money. And they took it, and there was nothing anybody could do about it. And you can say again, well, that doesn't happen here. And that's true until it's not. So finally, we have a way to opt out in Bitcoin. You can opt out of this interest-based system, like we talked about in the first video, that breeds this like selfish, economic mentality in all of us. And you can opt out of war, and you can opt out of inflation, or at least not have your money inflated away at somebody else's will. And there's an especially relevant kind of phrase in the cryptocurrency, circles. And that is, fix the money and fix the world. So now I want to show you some of the opportunities in Bitcoin in the next few years. And this is where we're going to get into kind of price and the cycles of Bitcoin. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you guys is this chart. We're going to jump over there, but this was actually put out by a major middleman in the traditional finance system. And that middleman is BlackRock. And if you don't know who BlackRock is, they are the largest asset manager in the entire world. So not just, some little guy. This was a big thing. And, it's worth noting that like 2 years ago, BlackRock did everything they could to slander and just dismiss Bitcoin entirely, really. And in the last year or so, they've seen that they can't stop it short of turning off the internet. And so they've decided, that they need to either assimilate or die. It's like we need to pivot our stance and kind of make our way in this new thing, or we're completely irrelevant. So they have actually come out and have been one of the biggest proponents for Bitcoin in the last year or so. But with this chart, what it shows is Bitcoin performance compared to all other to other major asset classes from 2013 to 2023. And this top row is the best performing asset. And what we see is in 2013, Bitcoin was the best performing asset. In 2014, it was the worst. In 2015, it was the best, worst. Best, worst. And then in 2023, Bitcoin was the best performing asset again. So hopefully you can kind of see that 4-year pattern. You've got these 3 years of being the best performing asset, and then that 4th year is the bear market and just absolutely horrible for Bitcoin. So you can kind of see, we've got best, worst, best, worst. 2023, we were the best. And if anything follows, 2024 will be the best, and 2025 will be the best. And then again in 2026, Bitcoin will be the worst amongst these asset classes. So you can kind of see what's likely to happen in the next 2 years. For this next one, I'm going to get into the Bitcoin charts a little bit, but we need to really kind of talk about the Bitcoin halving. And what the Bitcoin halving is every 4 years, Bitcoin, the supply of Bitcoin being mined every day is cut in half. So currently, miners are mining about 900 Bitcoin a day. In April of this year, we're going to have another halving, and that supply is going to get cut into half. So instead of mining 900 Bitcoin a day and having that Bitcoin come onto the market, that's going to be cut into half, and miners are only going to mine 450 Bitcoin a day. And what it does is it kind of creates this this supply shock, right? Like supply and demand, basic economic stuff. But it creates this supply shock, and you don't normally feel it right away. Like the day after Bitcoin halves, things don't go double right away. It usually historically has taken, 2 to 6 months or so to really have the Bitcoin network kind of feel the effects of the halving. So I'm going to jump on over to this chart. Okay, so over here in the Bitcoin chart, this is on the monthly, but this almost goes back to Bitcoin's very, when it first started. This goes back to, 2009, October 2009. So that's pretty much when Bitcoin, came onto the scene. But you can kind of see I've placed these green vertical lines at every day we had a Bitcoin halving. And so you can really kind of see the effect of the halving. In 2012, we hit this halving date, and we went from about $11 all the way up to about $1,300. And then, we hit that top and had the bear market, and everybody proclaimed that Bitcoin was dead. Cool, fun time, experiment, shut off the computers and go home. And we come to 2016, we hit this halving again, and you can just see that effect. And we went from about $500 at the halving all the way up to $20,000. And then we topped out there and we started coming back down. Everybody thought Bitcoin was dead again. But you can see, like, even if you bought at the top here, in 4 years, let's just measure 4 years out here. 4 years would be 48 months. And that would be right there, this bar. So you would be, in 4 years, you'd be up 800% right there. Even if you bought at the very top, you'd have a miserable time because you'd bought right here. You'd have this whole miserable first year. And man, those are not fun. But anyways, getting back, going into 2020, we see another halving, and that happened in May of 2020. And I'm going to actually kind of zoom in on this so we can kind of see. So May, we were about 8,200, and we went all the way up to $69,000 here. Almost hit 70,000, and then we peaked out and had this again, Bitcoin's dead year. And so you can really kind of see the effect, every time we hit that halving, we get this supply crunch and just shoot to the moon. So you can see where we're currently at, right? And so this is why I really wanted to get this information out as soon as possible, because the next halving is in April right here. It's due to be right around April 24th of 24. So, you can take bets that, again, we're just going to continue this pattern. But I want to show you another thing, just time frame wise. Like, once we hit this halving date, it is in this cycle, we went from the halving to the peak in 17 months. Okay, so almost a year and a half. Okay, now we're going to measure this one. Maybe. If I can get it to work. Oh, man, let's just do this. Okay, so oh man. Sorry, technical difficulties, guys. I have not run this program on computer, on PC enough. So if we go from the halving date in 2020 to the peak in, we peaked right here. So again, 17 bars, 17 months. It takes about a year and a half after every halving to hit our peak. And so you can take historical data like that and really kind of make an educated guess on, what the future kind of holds. Now, again, this doesn't necessarily, nobody can tell the future, obviously, but looking at those cycles, you can really kind of make an educated guess on what Bitcoin's going to do for the next 2 years. Now, there is an argument that this time is different, and that's possible because we do have these new Bitcoin ETFs that now are allowing institutions to kind of buy Bitcoin a lot easier than they used to. And so a lot of people are claiming that this cycle is going to be different and it's going to be the super cycle. And, there's a possibility of that, I will say. But to be honest, every single cycle we've had, I've pretty much heard that same argument every time. So I'm not completely convinced. I will do another chart analysis video and kind of give you a theory on what I think about this cycle. But that's not going to happen for a few more videos. I want to keep this as short as I can. Now, the last thing that I really want to get into and kind of show you guys is we're going to jump over to this little image of the chart. And this kind of shows, again, the cycle of the 2017 cycle. And this was kind of put out just to show, this Bitcoin is very volatile. So this is why a lot of people don't like it. And I completely understand because, like I said, I'm not going to paint everything all sunshine and roses for you guys because these are the days that Bitcoin, it's not fun, but you can see this is after the halving and we go up and we go up and then we hit these dips and these are massive dips. I mean, on the chart, you zoom out enough and it looks great. It looks like, we're going up and to the right, no worries. But when this is weekly, so every bar is a week. And so this first dip that you see, this 38% dip was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks of pretty much continuous downside for 8 weeks, 2 months. And it was a 38% dip. And then we had another 38% dip, and then a 33% dip, 38% dip, 36% dip, and then another 29% dip before we went on to get, you know, this all-time high of $20,000. So this is actually one of the most important things that you need to know if you're going to consider getting into Bitcoin, is you're going to have these days and these weeks at a time where things don't feel so great, you know, and, you know, if you're ever in doubt, you know, you kind of got to zoom out and take the big picture into account and really look at what history tells us, and you can kind of feel better that way. But these are hard times. So even though it looks really great, and it will be great if you get in and hold, you know, all the way up, these dips are big. And, you know, I just can't stress that enough, because if you're not prepared for these things, like I said, you're going to panic sell, and you're going to end up, you know, losing money, really. So, you know, we've got that one. I also want to show you really quick the 2020 cycle, because this isn't just a one-time thing with that volatility. So we're going to jump back over to TradeView, and I'm going to kind of show you on the 2020 cycle. We've got, you know, we halved here, and we had a dip here that went, where did we go? All the way down here. That was a 22% dip right there. Right here, I think this one ended up being like 15%. And then right here we had that was a 31% dip right there. And then again right here, oh my gosh. Okay, so we had right here, this little teeny one was 25% dip. And then right here, we have this huge crater, right? And this wasn't even, you know, the bear market. This was a 55% dip right there. And this one, there was a bit of a kind of a black swan event that happened right here. And what happened was China decided to make mining in China illegal. And so we saw this massive, you know, thing. But that said, you know, China has kind of flip-flopped on Bitcoin so many times, it's hard to keep track. And the network, you know, and the price saw kind of a dip. And then we just continued, like hash rate and the strength of the network just has gone up and up and up ever since. So, you know, we can kind of talk about that. I'll be doing another video, like I said, and we'll be talking about a theory that I have about this. And if you go back to right here, we have this crazy dip, which was COVID. And I've got a theory on, you know, kind of both of these that I kind of want to explain to you guys, but not in this video. All right, guys. So with that, I am going to finally wrap this video up. And I know today was a lot of information, a lot to wrap your mind around, but if you guys have any questions at all, please let me know in the comments. No question is a dumb question, and I will do my best to try and help explain to you a little bit further, or at least get you information on any questions you have. And if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe, because in a few videos, I'm going to have the how-to video, and that one's going to be really important. I'm going to show you guys the experience I have for the last 12 years, I'm going to show you the best ways I've found to buy and how to do it for the cheapest possible, reducing the fees on buying and what wallets to buy and all those important things. So you don't want to miss that. And like always, if you are looking to reduce your tax liability or just want to do something good today, please consider donating to Las Almas Animal Sanctuary. All of the sanctuaries that I'm going to be sharing here are small, and a little bit goes a long way to help these animals out. So you can see the PayPal to donate directly to those guys on that flyer. But I will leave that PayPal in the description also, as well as their website and Facebook. And with that, guys, I will see you in the next video. Bye.